The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in floating chairs that moved through the air like soap bubbles. The ceiling showed the stars outside, making everyone feel like they were floating in space itself. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the human section, which was small and tucked away in a corner. He wore his best uniform, but it looked plain next to the glowing robes and crystal armor of the other species. Next to him, Ambassador Lisa Grant checked her notes one more time. They had been coming to these meetings for 2 years now. Ever since Earth joined the Galactic Council. Most of the time, nobody paid attention to the humans. Earth was new, small, and had no special technology to offer. The bigger civilizations made all the important decisions while humans just watched and learned. Today felt different, though. Word had spread through the halls that something terrible was happening. Ships had been arriving all morning, carrying refugees and bad news from the outer rim of the galaxy. A soft chime filled the air, and all conversation stopped. High Chancellor Vextaran floated to the center of the hall. He was tall and thin, with purple skin that seemed to glow from within. His species, the hegemony, had ruled parts of the galaxy for thousands of years. The Council will now hear urgent matters, Vextaran announced. His voice carried to every corner of the massive hall without echo or strain. We have received disturbing reports from the outer territories. A small platform rose from the floor. On it stood a being unlike any Jake had ever seen. She looked like she was made of living water, with a body that shifted and flowed as she moved. Thin fins ran along her arms and back, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like waves on a beach. "Honored Council," the being said. "I am Zixthara, of the Velnari people. I come before you not as a representative, but as a survivor." Jake leaned forward in his chair. He had read about the Velnari in his briefing files. They lived on ocean worlds in the far reaches of the galaxy. They had no weapons, no armies, and no interest in politics. They spent their time creating art and studying the movement of water currents across their planets. 3 months ago, Zixthara continued, our outer colonies went silent. We sent ships to investigate. What we found... She paused, and her watery form seemed to tremble. What we found was nothing. No planets, no stars, no debris. Just empty space where entire solar systems used to be. A murmur ran through the council hall. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The ancient texts, speak of them, Zixthara said. The Devourers, machines from the dark time before the first civilizations rose. They sleep for millions of years, then wake to consume everything in their path. They turn matter into energy, energy into more machines. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped, cannot be bargained with. High Chancellor Vextaran floated, closer to the platform. Surely you exaggerate. No force could simply erase star systems. I have recordings, Zixthara replied. A hologram appeared above her head, showing a beautiful blue-green world surrounded by moons. This was Velnari Prime 7, home to 12 million of my people. The image flickered and changed. Now it showed empty black space. This was taken 6 days later. The hall erupted in shocked whispers and electronic squeals. Jake felt his stomach drop. 12 million people gone without a trace. The Devourers are coming, Zixthara said. They have consumed 15 of our worlds. Our calculations show they will reach the core systems within 6 months. My people are fleeing in whatever ships we can find, but there is nowhere to run. We come before this council to beg for protection, for sanctuary, for any help you can provide. She dropped to her knees, her watery form splashing slightly on the platform. Please, we have done nothing to deserve this fate. We ask only for the chance to survive. For a long moment, the hall was silent. Then High Chancellor Vextaran spoke. The hegemony has reviewed the historical records. The Devourers have appeared twice before in recorded history. Both times they consumed hundreds of worlds before returning to their slumber. Every civilization that fought them was destroyed. A new voice spoke up. It came from a being that looked like living crystal, each word creating tiny rainbows in the air. The Crystalline Confederacy agrees. The Devourers cannot be defeated. To fight them would be suicide. Another voice, this one speaking directly into everyone's mind. The Psionic Collective has foreseen this. The Velnari are already dead. We cannot waste resources on the impossible. One by one, every major power in the galaxy gave their answer. The same answer. No help would be coming. Jake watched Zixathara's form slump as each rejection hit her like a physical blow. Ambassador Grant gripped her chair so tightly her knuckles went white. Perhaps, High Chancellor Vexitaran said, the Velnari could be relocated to designated refugee zones in the outer territories. You mean abandon our worlds, Zixthara whispered. Leave everything we have ever built, everything we have ever been. It is preferable to extinction, Vexitaran replied coldly. Is it? The voice came from the human section. Every being in the hall turned to look as Ambassador Lisa Grant rose from her chair. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, but something in her voice made the entire council pay attention. Honorable Council, she said, Earth requests permission to address this matter. Vexitron's expression showed surprise and perhaps amusement. The humans wish to speak? Very well. Though I fail to see what perspective such a young species could offer. Ambassador Grant stepped forward. Behind her, Jake felt his heart start to race. He had no idea what she was about to say, but he could see the determination in her eyes. Earth has reviewed the situation, Grant said clearly. We have heard the pleas of the Velnari people. We have noted the response of this council. She paused and looked around the hall. Humanity formally declares our intention to provide military assistance to the Velnari in their fight against the Devourers. The hall exploded. Beings shouted, squealed, and projected thoughts of shock and disbelief. High Chancellor Vexitaran raised his hand for silence. Surely you jest, he said. Humanity has been part of this council for barely 2 years. You have no experience with galactic warfare, no understanding of the forces involved. You would be throwing away your entire species for a hopeless cause. Ambassador Grant stood straighter. Perhaps. But we would rather die fighting for what is right than live knowing we could have helped and chose not to. She looked directly at Zixthara, whose watery form had gone completely still. The Velnari will not face this alone. The silence that followed was deeper than space itself. The emergency meeting room in Earth's military headquarters buzzed with tension. Admiral Tony Blake sat at the head of the long table, his weathered face showing no emotion as he listened to the heated debate around him. Generals, politicians, and scientists argued back and forth, their voices growing louder with each exchange. This is madness. General Patricia Moore slammed her hand on the table. We're talking about sending our entire fleet against machines that eat planets. It's not war. It's suicide. Dr. Karen Wells, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, shook her head. The Velnari are peaceful people. They've never hurt anyone. How can we just let them die? Because we can't save them, Senator Bill Hayes replied sharply. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy said it's impossible. What makes us think we can do what they cannot? Admiral Blake finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the argument like a knife. Because they won't try. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the old military commander who had served in 3 different wars. I've read the reports, Blake continued. I've studied the historical data. Yes, the Devourers are powerful. Yes, they've destroyed civilizations before. But you know what I didn't see in those reports? I didn't see anyone actually fighting back. He stood up and walked to the wall screen, which showed a map of the galaxy. Every time the Devourers appeared, the other species ran away. They evacuated their worlds, abandoned their territory, and hoped the machines would go back to sleep. Nobody stood and fought. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Davis, the youngest officer in the room, leaned forward. Sir, what if we could find a way? What if there's something the others missed? Blake nodded to the young man. That's exactly what I'm thinking, Commander. Dr. Wells, what do we know about Velnari technology? The scientist pulled up her files. They're not warriors, but they're incredibly advanced in other ways. Their understanding of water dynamics, energy flow, and biological systems is far beyond ours. They've also been keeping detailed records of the Devourer attacks. Records the other civilizations don't have, Blake noted. Commander Davis, I want you to work with Dr. Wells. Study everything the Velnari can tell us about these machines. Look for patterns, weaknesses, anything we can use. Chief Engineer Maria Santos spoke up from the corner of the room. Admiral, if we're really doing this, I'll need to start modifying our ships immediately. Our weapons and shields weren't designed for this kind of threat. Blake turned to her. What do you need? Everything, Santos replied. New power cores, adaptive weapon systems, better armor. And I'll need Velnari technical data to make it work. The debate continued for hours, but slowly the tone began to change. Instead of arguing about whether to help, they started discussing how to help. Plans took shape, assignments were made, and preparations began. 3 days later, Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the First Fleet prepared for departure. 50 ships hung in space around Earth, from massive battleships to small fighter carriers. It was the largest force humanity had ever assembled. Admiral, his communications officer called out, "We're receiving a transmission from the Velnari refugee ship. Put it through." The main screen flickered and Zixathera appeared. She looked different than she had in the council chambers. Her watery form seemed more solid, more determined. "Admiral Blake," she said, "I cannot express what your decision means to my people. We know the risks you are taking." "We all take risks, Zixathera," Blake replied. "The question is whether we take them for something worth fighting for. My people have prepared everything we can share with you. Technical data, star charts, battle recordings from our lost worlds. Commander Davis has been working with our scientists around the clock." Blake nodded. Over the past 3 days, Davis had barely slept. He studied every piece of information the Velnari provided, looking for any advantage humanity might use. His reports were both encouraging and terrifying. "Have your people learned anything new?" Blake asked. Zixathera's form rippled with what might have been hope. "Perhaps. The Devourers are not random in their attacks. They follow energy signatures, seeking out the most advanced technology first. They also seem to have difficulty adapting to completely new types of weapons and tactics. Which means our primitive human technology might actually be an advantage," Blake said with a slight smile. "It is possible," she agreed. "Admiral, there is something else. My people wish to fight alongside you. We are not warriors, but this is our home we defend." Blake considered this. The Velnari had no military experience, but they knew their own space better than anyone. "We'll find a way to use your help. Every person who stands up to these machines makes us stronger." As the transmission ended, Blake turned to his crew. They were young, most of them. Few had seen real combat. They were heading into a battle that had destroyed civilizations with millions of years of experience. "Sir," Commander Davis approached, with a data pad. "I've been analyzing the Devourer attack patterns. They hit the most defended worlds first, then work their way down to easier targets. If we can make them think the Velnari worlds are heavily defended, they'll hit us with everything they have right from the start," Blake finished. "Instead of having time to learn and adapt, they'll commit their full force immediately." "Exactly. It's risky, but it might be our only chance to hurt them before they figure out our tactics." Blake looked around his bridge. These people had volunteered for what everyone expected to be a suicide mission. They could have stayed home safe on Earth. Instead, they chose to fly across the galaxy to fight for people they had never met. "Set course for Velnari space," he ordered. "Maximum speed." As the First Fleet jumped to hyperspace, news of their departure spread across the galaxy. On 100 worlds, beings watched in amazement as the newest, weakest members of the Galactic Council flew toward certain doom. Some called it noble, others called it foolish. A few, very quietly, called it inspiring. But everyone watched to see what would happen when humanity met the Devourers among the stars. Commander Alex Turner's small ship drifted silently through the asteroid belt at the edge of the Velnari system. Through his viewport, He could see the beautiful blue world that was home to billions of aquatic beings. It should have been a peaceful sight, but the wreckage floating around his ship told a different story. "Command, this is Scout 1. Turner spoke quietly into his radio. "I'm seeing debris from at least 12 Velnari ships. They're not old wrecks. These are fresh kills." Admiral Blake's voice crackled back through the static. "Any sign of the attackers?" Turner adjusted his sensors and felt his blood run cold. "Sir, I'm picking up movement on the far side of the asteroid field. Something big, multiple contacts." He switched his ship to passive scanning and moved closer. What he saw made his hands shake on the controls. 3 massive shapes moved through space like metal sharks. They were sleek and black, with no visible windows or obvious weapons. But as Turner watched, one of them extended a beam of energy that struck a nearby asteroid. The rock simply vanished, converted into raw material that flowed into the machine's hull. "My God," Turner whispered. "Admiral, the Devourers are already here. They're in the system." Back on the flagship, Admiral Blake studied the data Turner was sending. The machines were unlike anything in human military databases. They seemed to grow as they consumed matter, adding new sections to their hulls like living things. "How many?" Blake asked. 3 confirmed, but sir, they're building more. I can see construction happening inside the largest one." Dr. Ben Carter, the fleet's chief physicist, looked up from his instruments. "Admiral, these energy readings are off the charts. Each of those ships has more power than our entire fleet combined." Blake nodded grimly. "Turner, get back here. We need to warn the Velnari." As Turner's scout ship raced back to the main fleet, the human forces prepared for their first real look at the enemy. The 50 ships of Earth's first fleet looked tiny, compared to the vast ocean world they were protecting, but they were all that stood between the Velnari and extinction. Elder Quinthala's voice filled the communication channels. She was the oldest of the Velnari, her watery form ancient and wise. "Human friends, we have prepared our people for evacuation. Our deepest cities are ready to receive refugees from the surface." "Elder," Blake replied, "we may not have much time. My scouts report the Devourers are already in your system." "Yes," she said sadly. "We detected them 6 hours ago. They destroyed our outer defense stations without slowing down. Admiral Blake, you must understand something about my people. We have lived in peace for thousands of years. We have no weapons, no armies. We can only run and hide." Sergeant Nicole Price, leading a team of Marines on one of the transport ships, listened to the conversation with growing anger. "Elder, with respect, sometimes running isn't enough. Sometimes you have to stand and fight." The old Velnari's form shimmered. "Sergeant, your people have such courage. But what can we do against machines that eat planets? You can help us understand them," Price replied. "You've been watching these things for months. You know how they move, how they attack. That knowledge could save both our species." Dr. Carter was already working with Velnari scientists, sharing data and comparing observations. What they found was both helpful and terrifying. "The Devourers adapt," explained a young Velnari named Aksendi. "When our ships fired energy weapons, they adjusted their shields. When we tried kinetic attacks, they changed their armor. But there's something else. They seem to have trouble with biological systems." "What do you mean?" Carter asked. "Our worlds are covered with living oceans, full of countless tiny organisms. The Devourers can consume the water, but they struggle with the complex biological patterns. It's like they don't understand life." Carter's eyes lit up. "Admiral, I think I'm onto something. These machines were designed to fight technology, not biology. If we can combine our weapons with biological systems..." His explanation was cut short by alarms blaring throughout the fleet. Commander Turner's voice came over the radio, tense with fear. "Admiral, the Devourers just launched smaller ships, hundreds of them, heading straight for the planet." Blake moved to the bridge's main viewer. In the distance, he could see streams of silver dots racing toward the blue world. Each dot was a Devourer fighter, programmed to destroy anything in its path. "All ships, battle stations," Blake ordered. "Intercept those fighters before they reach the surface." The human fleet moved to block the Devourer attack. 50 ships against hundreds of alien fighters. The odds were terrible, but no one hesitated. The first contact came when Lieutenant Commander Ryan Davis led a squadron of human fighters against the leading edge of the Devourer swarm. His ships opened fire with everything they had, and for a moment, it seemed to work. Several Devourer fighters exploded in brilliant flashes, but then something changed. The remaining enemy ships adjusted their tactics, their shields, their movement patterns. Within minutes, they were adapting to human weapons. "They're learning," Davis reported as his squadron took heavy losses. "Every shot we fire teaches them how to defend against the next one." Down on the planet's surface, Sergeant Price and her Marines worked frantically to set up defensive positions around the main Velnari cities. The aquatic beings had never built fortifications, so the humans had to improvise. "Sergeant," called Private Johnny Martinez, "the Velnari are asking if they can help. Some of them want to fight." Price looked at the young Velnari who had volunteered. Axendi was among them, his watery form determined despite his obvious fear. "Can you use human weapons?" Price asked. "We can try," Axendi replied. "But perhaps we can help in other ways. The underwater currents, the biological systems Dr. Carter mentioned. We know our world better than the machines do." As the battle raged in space above them, an idea began to form. The Devourers were powerful, but they were also predictable. They attacked technology, they adapted to weapons, they consumed matter, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with the very life force of an entire planet. The first wave of Devourer fighters broke through the human fleet's defenses and began their attack on the surface. But as they descended toward the ocean, something unexpected happened. The water itself began to fight back. Schools of native fish directed by Velnari bioengineers swarmed the mechanical invaders. Ocean currents controlled by ancient Velnari technology created whirlpools that caught the small ships. Plants and microorganisms released chemicals that interfered with Devourer sensors. The machines had never encountered anything like it. For the first time in their existence, they hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, the combined human and Velnari forces struck back with everything they had. Captain Steve Miller pushed his fighter to its limits as he raced through the debris field that had once been the outer system. Behind him, 3 Devourer ships gave chase, their weapons charging for another deadly blast. His radio crackled with reports from across the battle zone. "Miller, where are you?" Commander Linda Hayes called from the command ship. "We need you at Sector 7. The big factory ship is almost finished building its next wave." "On my way," Miller replied, pulling his fighter into a sharp turn that would have killed a normal pilot. The enhanced gravity suit kept him conscious as he dove toward the massive Devourer construction ship. The factory ship was the size of a city, its hull covered with mechanical arms that grabbed asteroids and fed them into glowing furnaces. Every few minutes, a new fighter emerged from its production bays, ready to join the endless swarm attacking the human fleet. Miller armed his special weapon, one of Dr. Carter's new biological bombs. Instead of explosives, it carried millions of Earth bacteria designed to interfere with Devourer systems. The scientist had worked around the clock to create something the machines couldn't adapt to. "This is for Admiral Blake," Miller whispered, thinking of his fallen commander. 3 days ago, Admiral Blake had made the ultimate sacrifice. When the main Devourer fleet arrived, he had rammed his flagship directly into their command ship while carrying Dr. Carter's first quantum weapon. The explosion had crippled dozens of enemy vessels, but it had cost Blake his life and left the human fleet without its leader. Now Commander Hayes was in charge, trying to coordinate a desperate defense with half their ships destroyed and reinforcements still days away. Miller's fighter screamed toward the factory ship, dodging streams of energy fire. At the last second, he released his biological weapon and pulled up hard. The bomb struck the ship's main production center and exploded in a cloud of living organisms. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the factory ship began to shake. Its mechanical arms moved erratically, grabbing at nothing. Sparks flew from its hull as the Earth bacteria interfered with its circuits. It's working, Miller shouted into his radio. The bioweapon is working. Down on the planet's surface, Sergeant Nicole Price watched the sky light up with explosions. The battle had been raging for a week, and both sides were exhausted. Her Marines had held the perimeter around the main Velnari city, but barely. Sergeant, called Aksendi, the young Velnari who had become her closest ally in the fighting. My people report movement in the deep trenches. The Devourers are trying to reach our underwater cities. Price grabbed her rifle and checked the magazine. How many? Dozens of the small ones. They've adapted to work underwater, but they're still having trouble with our biological defenses. Over the past week, the Velnari had proven to be far more capable than anyone expected. They couldn't use human weapons, but they had turned their entire world into a weapon. Ocean currents became traps, sea creatures became scouts, and the microscopic life in their waters became a constant threat to devourer systems. Private Martinez, Price called to her communications specialist. Get me Commander Hayes. The radio crackled to life. Hayes here, Sergeant. What's your status? We're holding, but barely. The Devourers are adapting faster than we hoped. They're learning to work around our biological attacks. Copy that. We're seeing the same thing up here. Dr. Carter says he has one more idea, but he needs time to prepare it. Chief Engineer Maria Santos floated in zero gravity inside the wreckage of a human destroyer, working frantically on a device that might save them all. Dr. Carter's final weapon was brilliant in its simplicity, but it required precise timing and enormous power. Dr. Carter, she called over her suit radio. The quantum disruptor is ready, but I can only build one. If this doesn't work... It has to work, Carter replied from his laboratory on the command ship. The Devourer's main weakness isn't their inability to handle biology. It's their interconnected network. They share information instantly across their entire fleet. If we can disrupt that network, they'll lose coordination, Santos finished. All their ships will stop working together. Exactly. But we need to get the weapon to their command network, and that means getting close to the biggest ship in their fleet. The biggest Devourer ship hung in space like a metal moon. It was 10 times larger than any human vessel, covered with weapons and protected by dozens of smaller ships. Getting close enough to deliver the weapon would be suicide. Commander Hayes stared at the tactical display, knowing what she had to do. The human fleet was down to 12 operational ships. The Velnari homeworld was under siege. Earth's reinforcements wouldn't arrive for another 2 days. All ships, this is Hayes, she broadcast to the remaining fleet. We're going to make one final push, target the command ship, everything we have. Captain Miller's voice came over the radio. Commander, my fighter squadron is ready. We'll clear a path for you. Negative, Miller. You've done enough. This is my call. Hayes looked around the bridge of her ship. Her crew was young, tired, and scared, but they were also determined. They had come too far to give up now. Ma'am, her navigation officer said quietly, if we ram the command ship like Admiral Blake did... I know, Hayes replied. Signal the other ships. Any crew who wants to transfer to the evacuation vessels has 5 minutes. Nobody moved. Ma'am, the weapons officer said, we're with you. As the human fleet made its final charge toward the Devourer command ship, something unexpected happened. The Velnari, who had never fought a war in their entire history, rose from their ocean cities to join the battle. Thousands of small Velnari vessels emerged from the deep waters, carrying biological weapons and crews who had decided they would rather die fighting than live in fear. Elder Quinthala's voice filled the communication channels. Human friends, she said, you have shown us that some things are worth fighting for. We will not let you stand alone. The combined human and Velnari fleet struck the Devourer formation like a hammer. Ships exploded on both sides as the desperate battle reached its climax. Commander Hayes guided her vessel through the chaos, the quantum disruptor weapon ready in her cargo hold. Almost there, she called to Dr. Carter. Prepare for deployment. The command ship's weapons locked onto her vessel. Energy beams stabbed through space, tearing chunks from her hull. But Hayes kept flying, her ship dying around her as she closed the final distance. Now, she shouted. The quantum disruptor launched from her ship just as a devourer beam cut through her bridge. In her final moments, Hayes saw the weapon strike the enemy command ship and explode in a wave of disrupted energy that spread through the entire devourer fleet. Across the battle zone, the mechanical ships suddenly stopped moving in coordination. They began firing randomly, crashing into each other, their shared network broken. For the first time in the war, the devourers were vulnerable. Captain Steve Miller floated in his damaged fighter, watching the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. All around the Velnari system, the massive devourer ships hung motionless in space like dead whales. The quantum disruptor had worked. The ancient machines that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years were finally silent. All units, this is Captain Miller, he broadcast on the emergency channel. The devourers have stopped moving. Repeat, all enemy ships are dead in space. Cheers erupted across the communication channels. Human voices mixed with the musical tones of the Velnari as both species celebrated their impossible victory. But the celebration was mixed with grief. So many good people had died to make this moment possible. 3 weeks later, President Helen Brooks stood before the largest gathering in human history. The rebuilt Galactic Council chamber was packed with representatives from every known civilization. But this time, the human section was not tucked away in a corner. Earth's delegation sat in the place of honor, right next to the Velnari representatives. Fellow beings of the galaxy, President Brooks began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. We gather today not just to celebrate a victory, but to remember what that victory cost and what it taught us. The president was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but when she spoke, even the most powerful beings in the galaxy listened carefully. 3 months ago, the Velnari people came before this council seeking help against an ancient threat. They were turned away by every major civilization. They were told their cause was hopeless, their lives expendable. She paused and looked directly at High Chancellor Vextaran, who sat with his head bowed in shame. Humanity chose differently. We chose to stand with those who needed help, even when the odds seemed impossible. We lost good people in that fight. Admiral Blake, Commander Hayes, and thousands of others gave their lives so that an entire species could survive. Elder Quinthala rose from her seat, her watery form shimmering with emotion. President Brooks speaks truly, but the humans did not fight alone. In our darkest hour, we learned that we too could be warriors when necessary. Together, we achieved what no single species could accomplish. Ambassador Lisa Grant, now promoted to Secretary of Galactic Affairs, stepped forward with a datapad in her hand. The battle for the Velnari system taught us important lessons about cooperation and courage. Today, Earth and the Velnari people jointly proposed the Universal Protection Protocol. A hologram appeared above the assembly, showing the text of the new agreement. This protocol states that no species seeking help against extinction will be turned away by this council. Every civilization has value. Every life has worth. We will stand together or fall separately. High Chancellor Vexitaran finally rose to speak. The proud being who had once dismissed humanity looked older now, his purple skin dim with regret. The hegemony wishes to formally apologize to both the Velnari and human peoples. We allowed fear and arrogance to blind us to our moral duties. We request permission to sign this new protocol and to offer our military support for its enforcement. One by one, every major power in the galaxy added their support to the Universal Protection Protocol. The Crystalline Confederacy, the Psionic Collective, the Trade Federation, all of them pledged to defend species in need. But the changes went deeper than just new laws. Captain Jake Morrison, promoted to general after the war, now led the new Galactic Defense Force. The GDF was a joint military organization with ships and crews from dozens of different species, all working together to protect the innocent. The interesting thing, Morrison explained to a group of new recruits, is how much we learned from each other during the war. Human determination, Velnari biological knowledge, hegemony manufacturing, crystalline energy systems. When we combine our strengths instead of competing with them, we become stronger than any single species could be alone. Dr. Karen Wells had become the director of the new Interspecies Research Institute. Her work with Velnari scientists during the war had led to breakthrough discoveries in biology, medicine, and technology. The Velnari taught us to think of life as a connected system, she explained in her latest report. Their understanding of biological networks helped us develop new medical treatments, better food production, and even improved space travel. In return, our human engineering helped them build new types of cities and transportation systems. Chief Engineer Maria Santos was now in charge of the Galactic Shipyard project, where engineers from every species worked together to build new kinds of starships. The latest designs combined human durability, Velnari biological systems, and alien technology in ways no one had imagined before the war. But perhaps the most important change was in how the different species saw each other. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Davis, now Admiral Davis, often told the story of Axendi, the young Velnari who had fought alongside Sergeant Price during the siege. Before the war, Axendi had never held a weapon or raised his voice in anger. But when his world was threatened, he found courage he didn't know he had. And Sergeant Price, who started the war thinking the Velnari were too peaceful to be useful, ended up learning their biological warfare techniques and using them to train our own forces. Price herself had become the head of the new Interspecies Marine Corps, where human soldiers trained alongside warriors from a dozen different worlds. The war had also brought unexpected technological advances. Dr. Carter's quantum disruptor technology, combined with Velnari biological knowledge, led to new discoveries in energy production, faster than light travel, and even ways to heal damaged planets. 6 months after the war ended, Captain Miller stood on the observation deck of the new space station orbiting the Velnari homeworld. The blue planet below looked peaceful again, its cities rebuilt and its people thriving. "Hard to believe how different everything is now," he said to Axendi, who had become his closest friend and partner in the new joint patrol squadrons. "Change was necessary," the Velnari replied, his form rippling with contentment. "For too long the galaxy was ruled by fear and selfishness. Your people showed us a better way." Miller smiled. "Our people, you mean? We're all in this together now." As they watched, ships from a dozen different species arrived and departed from the station. Human freighters carried Velnari art to distant worlds. Crystalline science vessels worked alongside Earth research ships. Former enemies had become allies, united by the simple idea that every life was worth defending. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still problems to solve. But something fundamental had changed. The strong no longer abandoned the weak. The advanced no longer ignored the primitive. Every species knew that when trouble came, they would not face it alone. And somewhere in the deep archives of the Galactic Library, historians recorded the story of how the newest, supposedly weakest member of the galactic community had taught ancient civilizations the most important lesson of all, that true strength comes not from power or technology, but from the courage to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. The age of isolation was over. The age of cooperation had begun.